Welcome back. For those of you returning, welcome. For those of you new to my channel, so this is the next fresh out of 24 stage loop de loop. And boy, oh boy, was this a fun one. Did not know that at this time JD is actually in the lower category because of the Zwift Racing Score shuffle that happened over the weekend. And so even though I was in the same category as him before the weekend started, the race that I did on Friday ended up boosting me up since I got first place in that race. And so I'm back in my original category and feeling like that's where I belong. So I took a second to look at, on the Zwift Racing app to see, where some of these riders place. And so far, the Zwift Racing app has done pretty well to kind of put me in. So before the race starts, if you've already signed up for the race, what it will do is kind of rank you in order, and it ranks you by your e-velo score. So mine being what it is, it put me in coming in 10th place, which I thought would be fantastic if that's how the race went. But as always, there's people who aren't on the app or show up um, minutes before the race starts, so that score or that placement's going to vary. But so far, it's done pretty well to um, place me kind of in the area that I end up finishing in. And ultimately, it's because the way the scoring system works for the eVelo, um, while it's similar to the Zwift Racing score in the sense that you can kind of expect like in this race, you can expect someone in the upper 500s to be at the front of the race unless unless they're not putting out any serious effort. And then same thing with the guys like me and the guys that are in the lower 300s. You should expect us to end up in the back of the race. And so here we go off the line. It started off actually a lot milder than I thought. I kind of pushed hard off the front a little bit and then realized that the pace wasn't going as strong, so I backed off a little bit. And you can see we kind of quickly go into the mid 200s, which for me is FTP zone, and then kind of drop into you know into the upper 100s, which again started off way milder than what I would have expected for for this level of racing. Maybe people are getting people are worried about who they ended up with, or how the groups are going to go, so they the unfamiliarity kind of led them to start off mild the way they did, but who knows. So we're just cruising up the hillside here, and I'm going to fast forward to the main hill at the end of this because that is really where the action kicks up. So as I suspected, as we get to the start of this hill, the group starts to pick up pace. A couple of people go off the front, and my focus was to stay with this front group. I knew there were some strong riders. Looking at their velo scores, they had much stronger scores than I did. So I knew there was going to be some guys that, push hard here and try and split up the group a bit. And as you see, even though I pushed hard to stay up front, I ended up falling off the back a little bit. But thankfully, this downhill part is easy for me to kind of put a little bit of a surge and use my weight to help me get back on to this front group. And as we get down to the bottom of the beginning of the sprint here, we have this little cluster that kind of forms up, and I see that this front group is really starting to pull away. They're a few seconds ahead of us right now, 1-2 seconds ahead of us. So I decide to surge, not to try and get a good sprint time, although my 13-second sprint was pretty good. But I put in a surge to catch this front group, thinking that we might not get a chance to get back to them. if I didn't do that. But ultimately, it ended up being a wasted effort because they slowed down quite a bit through this tunnel, and the rest of the group ended up catching up. So as I take a quick swig of water there, just trying to get my bearings as I get back into this group, and again just gonna forward on to the next event, because this is kind of how this race goes, where the group is kind of staying together, and then some people push hard off the front and then stay together, and so on and so forth. So a quick jump cut to the beginning of the KOM. Nothing really happened in between there. Just as you see, we all stayed together. And the reason why I wanted to kind of point out the segment here is I wanted to kind of talk about my watts per kilogram here. I'm climbing at 5 watts per kilogram. I spiked up to 6 watts per kilogram there for a second. Um, and then kind of now the power's starting to come down a bit at 4, which that first turn on the Zwift KOM, I always tend to put out a lot of power to try and essentially not get slowed down by the high percentage incline, and then kind of balance out my effort, trying to stay in the 300s, mid 300s, so I can keep up with this group. And as you see, the group is starting to split up a little bit. That front group is really starting to pull away. The second group is starting to kind of split, but at the same time, we're kind of still within arm's reach of each other. So I deploy my featherweight because I like to use it at the second half, primarily because of this long, it's a long, draggy 6%. That the first half is a lot harder, and yeah, I could use it going up the higher percentages, but the higher, that beginning part goes by so quickly for me, especially through the higher percentages, that ultimately I don't really feel like I feel it much. It's the second half that for me hurts the most. And so I like using it here on the second half. As you see, I catch up to a couple more guys and just trying to focus on staying with this group ahead of me. And when you really look at what's happening, this group is really starting to split apart. If you look at the group bubbles on the right hand side, it is just crazy how it's splitting apart so quickly, and that's just a testament to how strong these riders are. And so I see a couple guys ahead of me. I know I got a couple people that I just passed. So my thought is, if I can catch the riders ahead of me, I know the riders behind, especially since we have some downhill coming up, I know the riders behind can catch up, and so we can get a decent sized group going and start to look at what effort it's going to take to catch up to the next front group. So after a little bit of time, our group does start to come together. I ease up a little bit because ultimately I'm trying to conserve a little power, especially since I wasn't able to bridge to the group in front of me, and so the couple people behind me started catching up as I was easing off the pace. And so I figure we could work together. I'll do what I can to you know essentially treat this like a team time trial and work, and just make sure that I'm doing what I can, because my focus at this point is the group in front of us is 13, 12 seconds ish, ahead of us. The group in front of them is, maybe another 10 seconds. So if we can catch the next group and, get together, then we can ultimately, um, form a big enough group where we might be able to pull back the lead group. And so that's my thought here is just kind of pushing on some effort, getting up to the front, and ultimately wanting to keep this pace a little bit hard, just so that way we can do the work to catch the groups ahead of us. Just taking advantage of the super tuck, because that's what it's there for. And while sometimes I do like to pedal going downhill, because it kind of the super tuck will stabilize you, and depending on how steep the hill is, you will end up catching speed. But as you see, as I come off the backside of this bridge, I just shaved off like almost 10 kilometers per hour by not pedaling through that. And so the two riders behind me catch up, and we just kind of continue together for a little while. So as we get to the base of the hill coming out of the Zwift beachfront, I see the group ahead of us, and that is my focus at this point. You see I'm putting out, almost 400 watts, and I'm just looking to catch that group and in a way create that bridge between me and the riders behind me so they can essentially slingshot off of me into that front group, and then I can, do the same thing, slingshot off of them and, catch back up. And so as we turn the corner, I'm still holding a little bit of effort, but definitely, I mean, you look at my heart rates in the mid 180s, which for me, that is, up there in terms of effort. That's usually where I start to max out and fall apart. But this time I'm surprised because I looked at, as I was riding, I was looking at my heart rate and realizing like, man, I'm doing some good efforts in that range in the upper 180s. And so I was happy about that. And as I, catch back onto this group, the riders behind me end up catching up as well. And so from here, it's just focused on, trying to keep this group together or stay with this group as long as possible. We got a couple strong riders in here, which is obviously why they kind of got away from us to begin with. But, I wanted to make sure that this time we, stay together until that, last KOM. So as we start to get up this climb, I'm holding steady watts. I do like to climb at a high, watts per kilogram because it, keeps me, because I'm in that 70 RPM range, I feel good. Like I don't feel like I'm putting out too much effort. And you can see the rider that was staying with me, Palmer, I believe her last name is, she was killing it. It seemed like she was trying to pass me at one point, so I kind of put a little bit extra effort to try and stay ahead of her. And then as we get to the top, I ease off because I know that coming down this hill, I'll be able to, get back together with this group. And, as expected, we, come together and just kind of roll through this part of the hills as a group. And so here we go again at the Watopia beachfront. I decide to put in a little bit of a surge because I see that the group ahead of us is only, 11, 12 seconds ahead. So I thought if I could, essentially drag the group behind me like I had in the past to where, we are within reach of them, then I can essentially slingshot them forward off of me and then use them to kind of pull me forward as well. But ultimately that ends up not happening. As I start to, ease the power here, I realize that no one's really coming forward to help me with, catching this group, which is what happens when you kind of do these solo efforts without kind of making your plan known of, hey, let's, I should have messaged and be like, hey, let's bridge, to this next group. I can do, I can do the pull. I just, I'm not going to be able to get everybody all the way. And so we come to, the base of the Zwift KOM again, and my focus is on just trying to catch my breath a little bit, bring my heart rate down, spin my legs out so that way I can, get a little bit of recovery in there before this effort starts again, which, this is one thing about this course that I'm, I like but don't like at the same time. Having to do this with KOM twice in one stage is tough. It's not a difficult climb, it only takes a couple minutes, but it's still tough to have to do that, 2 times back to back in a stage. And so as we hit the base of the KOM, I'm, I have my feather, so I know I, I'm thinking about where I'm going to use it. I'm putting out, again, hitting this corner at 5 watts per kilogram, thinking about, how to stay with this group, keep up with this group. I end up deciding to deploy my feather early because I knew that, getting up the back half of this first part of the hill was going to be essential for me to try and keep up with this group because they were pulling away, and I knew I wasn't going to be able to keep my wattage that high in order to stay with them, even though I'm still in the upper fours, low fives, which I was excited about because I didn't realize that's the effort that I was doing until I glanced over midway up and saw that I was in the 400s, and I was like, wow, like I'm still here. And so as I get to the top of this middle section, I ease off the power a bit because I could not hold that. I held it longer than I thought I could, but I wasn't going to be able to hold it any longer at this point. So I knew that in this little flat spot, I can spin my legs out a little bit, even if people get in front of me as they are right now, I would be able to catch up with them on the backside of the hill. But little did I know that these guys, because of all the efforts, ultimately all the efforts that I ended up taking off the front to kind of pull this group, they were a little bit more rested than I was, seemingly, and they bolted. You can see they've already got a couple seconds on me, and I didn't realize that Palmer had the KOM previously, and so they're pulling away. Again, here goes my phone or my sweat triggering my phone. I panicked a little bit when that happened, and so I see them pulling away, and I just can't do anything about it. I'm trying to hold 300 watts, trying to push what I can to catch up, but you can see my watts are kind of all over the place at this moment, staying in the threes, but they'll, drop down momentarily and then kind of spin back up because I'm just struggling at this point to keep that going. So on this little bit of a flat part, I, spin up as much as I can to try and I usually treat this last 100 meters kind of like a sprint because the steepest part of it is really not that bad. It's only a few percentage, it's like 6%, but it's only for a couple, tens of meters. And then you just keep powering through it. And as it starts to flatten out a bit, just, trying to keep my power up close to 300. But as you see on the right, these guys are already 13 and 17 seconds ahead of me. So I'm not going to catch up to them at this point. I knew that, even though I have the draft bus there for the downhill, I knew I wasn't going to catch up to them. They were, pulling away, holding, almost 4 watts per kilogram, 5 watts per kilogram. So I knew that, that wasn't going to happen, especially with me trying to recover on this downhill. So at this point, my race is essentially over, but again, it's, I'm in 20th place at this moment. So I knew that as long as I held that, the people behind me were far enough behind that I wasn't too worried. If their name isn't on the bottom of the screen, then I'm not worried about, where they're at. It's when their name starts to pop up that I, start to take notice and, think about, okay, what do I need to, what am I going to do? Am I going to push hard to stay ahead of them, or am I going to let them catch up and then, work with them until the end? So here we go. We got 600 kilometers left, 500 now. And the person behind me, I start to see their name pop up on the bottom of my screen. They're within 5 seconds. And at this point, I was just thinking that I am not going to let them catch me. They were getting close, but I was going to, time trial it essentially to the finish line. I start to coast a little bit, thinking that, okay, I pulled away from them, I got them, but and then I realized my speed started dropping a little too fast. So I put out one final effort to surge up, and again, my sweat almost ruined my race. So after that quick little surge and my phone faux pas, I was able to coast in and stay in 20th place here at the end of the stage, which was, again, even though Zwift recategorized, everybody and kind of shuffled things around. My racing score is ultimately not that far off from where it was before I started or before the reshuffle. So, I kind of am back where I was. And, you can see my 5 minute powers at 3.4 watts per kilogram. My 15 second is up there. My 20 minute power being at 3.0 is pretty good. And then same thing with 3.4 for 5 minute. Even though I have held higher wattage, showing off my new shoes because that I felt like was a game changer. Um, the new shoes with the new cleats, I ended up putting the new cleats uh, in so that way my feet are pushed outward ever so slightly. So my hips, knees, and my feet are somewhat closely aligned. I think I got to pull them in just a little bit to get them perfectly aligned. But I felt like I was using more of my leg muscles, my quads and my hamstrings than just specific ones. So my quads didn't really feel as burnt out as they have in the past with races like this. So I felt good, felt strong. My new shoes felt absolutely amazing. The bottom part is not only solid, which obviously they would be, but compared to my previous shoes, these really feel supported. Like these feel like when I push my foot down, the whole shoe is responding, not just the front part. Oftentimes, what would happen is with my previous shoes, I put power down, and my outside toes would actually um, would start to feel some discomfort, and then the my inside toes would start to go numb a bit because I was primarily putting power on half my foot, and it felt awkward. The plastic in the old one really doesn't feel as reinforcing as the new ones do. So, uh, took a chance to show it off there. Just checking in with JD at the moment because he was in, his race and had literally just finished as minutes after I did. Probably not even minutes, but shortly after I did. He did fantastic. Go check out his race. I think he ended up in fourth place. Ethan Keys, which is also in that race, ended up in third, which is fantastic because that means they will be back in the 350 to 520 category here in no time, and we'll all be racing together again instead of separately. So that is it. This was our Monday night race. Hope you enjoyed, and I will catch you tomorrow for the Zwift Racing League.